Welcome to our channel, the fastest and most complete update of news, analysis, and predictions about the movie Beyond the Gates airing on Friday, May 30th. Here, you will be immersed in thrilling stories, unexpected developments, and in-depth analysis to help you better understand the mysterious world that the movie brings. When night falls on the town where all secrets are buried under the peaceful appearance, Kat still does not stop on her journey to discover the truth. No one expected that she, a woman who has experienced deep trauma, could take on the role of a detective. But not an official detective, but a woman driven by insecurity, suspicion, and a burning desire for justice. She has dug herself deep into the dusty layers of the past, where everything related to Leslie becomes suspicious. When Kat finds a hidden video stored on an old hard drive hidden behind a wall in the house that once belonged to a friend who mysteriously disappeared, she can't believe her eyes. In the video, Leslie is seen in an unfamiliar setting, exchanging a bag of cash with a masked man. The nature of the transaction is unclear, but it's clear that this isn't something an innocent person would do in the dark. To make matters worse, the man in the video is identified as one of the main suspects in a massive investment fraud that has bankrupted dozens of families. Kat knows that if the video comes to light, Leslie could be dragged into dangerous legal trouble, or worse, become the center of a financial scandal. However, what troubles Kat the most is that Leslie was once her best friend, someone she shared her every belief with. So what drove Leslie so deep into the mire of sin? Was it desperation, or was it the true nature she had been hiding all this time? Kat couldn't be sure, but she couldn't ignore the evidence that was eating away at her mind every night. Meanwhile, Ted was still trapped in a maze of regret and remorse. Every path he had taken to win Nicole back led to a dead end. He had tried everything: long, loving letters, surprise appearances at her workplace, standing outside her apartment at night just to feel the familiar warmth of the light shining through the window. But it was all one-sided. Nicole had changed. She was no longer the woman who always returned to him after every outburst. Now she was strong, determined, and seemed to have found a new reason to move on without him. Ted couldn't understand why everything had collapsed so quickly. They had it all: love, dreams, and memories that he thought would hold them together forever. But what Ted didn't realize was that he lost Nicole not on the day she left, but every time he hurt her with his careless words, every time he forgot her in his own priorities. Now that he's come to his senses, Nicole's heart has become cold and distant, like a locked door with no key to open it again. Elsewhere in town, Anita is living in a state of half-awake, half-dreaming. Old fears like long-standing nightmares suddenly return without warning. She thought she had buried the past, but painful memories always know how to knock on the door when she's at her weakest. Something is changing. She felt the familiar signs: a strange car parked across the street, an anonymous letter sent to her, hinting that the person who had hurt her was back. Anita knew she couldn't hide forever. But she also didn't want her past to affect what she was trying to build: a new life. A stable job, and most importantly, a man she had just opened her heart to after years of being closed off. Every night, Anita woke up in a cold sweat. She rummaged through old files, torn pieces of paper, faded photos that she had hidden away like a broken part of her body. She didn't know who was stalking her, but one thing was certain: it knew her past, knew her weaknesses, the secrets that no one else had ever heard of. In that uneasy moment, Anita realized that to protect her future, she had to face the old ghosts. But will she have the strength to do it, or will she fall back into the same pit she struggled to escape? The story becomes more complicated as all three characters begin to unintentionally be pulled into each other's orbits. Kat approaches Ted because she thinks he might have more information about Leslie, since Ted had made a questionable investment in a company Leslie ran in the past. Although Ted insists that he is just a victim, Kat sees something in his eyes that is being hidden. And then, in a document Kat finds, she discovers Anita's name as someone indirectly involved in a shady financial transaction that took place several years ago. The picture begins to emerge. Leslie may not have acted alone. She may have been part of a complex web of financial secrets, betrayals, and hidden agendas behind a friendly smile. Kat realizes that the evidence she holds may be the final piece that will bring everything crashing down, not just for Leslie, but perhaps for people like Ted and Anita who were seemingly unrelated. Torn between justice and personal feelings, Kat is faced with a life-or-death decision: continue investigating and make everything public, or bury the video forever, along with all the consequences it may bring. Ted, in the pain of loss, begins to doubt himself, and a part of him begins to wonder if Nicole's disappearance is connected to a larger plan he never imagined. Anita, meanwhile, is now not only battling the ghosts of her past, but is also forced to dig deep into things she once tried to forget, to find the answer to why her name appeared in that secret document. The lines that once seemed separate begin to intersect like a spider's web. An anonymous phone call arrives to Kat, warning her to stop investigating or else something bad will happen to the person she loves. A strange letter arrives for Ted, containing photos of Nicole with an unidentified man, a message that he has been followed for a long time. And Anita, when opening an old locked mailbox, finds inside a bloody key and the words, "Every sin has its price." It's just the beginning. And in the darkness of unspoken secrets, no one knows who is controlling everything from behind the scenes. Kat sits quietly in a small room where the dim light illuminates each photo she has pinned tightly to the wall. Each photo is a piece in a maze of lies, faces once familiar now appearing cold and strange. She fixes her eyes on Leslie's photo, the same smile, the same eyes, but now different. Kat realizes she no longer knows who her old friend is. The video was on an encrypted hard drive, and only she knew the password to open it. But she knew one thing. Once the video was exposed, it would not only destroy Leslie, but also bring a series of other names into the light, including the person she had once thought was the victim, Ted. Kat went back to the financial records of the company that Leslie had managed. She compared the transaction lines with the information she had gathered from old documents in her father's warehouse, where Leslie had visited years ago, under the pretext of learning more about investing. Now everything seemed clearer, a series of transfers through shell companies in an unknown island nation, amounting to millions of dollars. There was one name that repeated in many of the transactions, Ted. Not under his own name, but through a shell company under a third party's name, a false name that Kat tracked down and discovered matched a former employee of Ted's who had mysteriously disappeared 2 years earlier. The clues began to spiral like needles straight to the heart. Leslie may have been the manipulator, but Ted was far from innocent. On the other side of town, Ted began to feel the pressure. Every night, he was haunted by the face of Nicole, the woman who had left his life as decisively as if there had never been a wound. But the pain was not just in losing the person he loved, but in the slowly emerging truth that made him realize that everything he had tried to hide had come back like a cold knife cutting into his mind. He had thought everything was covered up perfectly. But someone had found out. Not only was she stalking him, she was leaving behind signs that made him feel like he was being hunted. Ted received an anonymous email that contained exactly 4 words, "She knows." No return address, no signature, no other information. But he knew exactly who she was. Kat. The woman who had once considered him part of the family. Now she held evidence that could destroy his life. He began to track Kat's every move, hire surveillance, and probe to see if she had shared her secret with anyone else. A strange fear rose inside him, a mixture of guilt and worry that the old secret might drag down names he couldn't protect, including Nicole herself. For Anita, the signs of suspicion don't stop there. Haunted by a bloody key in the mailbox, she begins to recall the dark days of her old city where she was forced to act as an intermediary for a group of money launderers she thought were friends. She tried to cut all ties after a horrific incident left her cousins seriously injured and forced to live in seclusion. But now the ghost of that organization seems to be back, this time targeting her with a purpose she can't yet figure out. And what terrifies Anita most is the name Ted, once one of the big partners of the people she tried to escape. One rainy afternoon, Anita meets a strange man in an abandoned parking lot where she had arranged to meet people in the organization many years ago. The man hands her a photo. In the photo is Leslie, shaking hands with a man whose face she can't see. But the ring he's wearing is unmistakable, it's the symbol of the old gang Anita tried to escape from. Not just Leslie, but Ted, and now Kat, all of them have been dragged into this dangerous vortex, either intentionally or unintentionally. Anita knows that if she doesn't do something, they could all be caught up in a case that will not only ruin their reputations but also take their lives. Kat digs deeper and discovers that the masked man in the video is linked to a mysterious disappearance many years ago, the victim was a young businessman who had invested with Leslie and Ted. The case was closed for lack of evidence, but Kat discovers that the case file has been tampered with, and the final signature is that of a police officer who quit a month later, a former classmate of Leslie's. Kat begins to suspect that the whole thing was staged to cover up a more sinister truth. That the disappearance was not an accident, but the result of a conspiracy to eliminate witnesses. The tension becomes even more acute when a local newspaper receives an anonymous video clip, a copy of the clip Kat had. But this time, the video has been edited, Leslie's face is blurred, and the masked man is clearer than ever, and it's Ted. The town is in an uproar. The media begins to dig into his past, and Kat is suspected of releasing the video. Ted denies everything, insisting that the video is fake. But deep down, he knows that someone is trying to set him up, and that someone knows all the secrets. Anita realizes that danger is coming and she must act before things get out of hand. She quietly collected old documents, called her cousin, who still lived in seclusion under a false identity, to ask about the names involved in the money laundering case in the past. She began to redraw the map of the old connections, each character, each investment, each shady bank account. This person is believed to be behind all the arrangements, coercion, manipulation, and turning young businessmen into puppets in the international money laundering and blackmail network. The deeper Anita dug, the more terrified she became when she realized that it was Kat's biological father who had disappeared without a trace many years ago after being accused of financial fraud. But if he was dead as the records showed, perhaps Kat herself did not know that the father she once admired was controlling the fate of all three in unexpected ways. Don't miss anything, subscribe and follow the channel today to explore the most dramatic and fascinating stories with us.